This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let we go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this live-ish recording of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. We hope you guys are enjoying what is just now 8 o'clock Central on ACC Network, the schedule reveal for the ACC, for SMU, for everyone right now. And we are reacting live as it's coming. So if you see me kind of looking through the camera, I'm watching my TV right now. I've got Hayden Howerton with me, and we're about to get into this here. As soon as that week 1 kind of gets rolling here, we'll just bring it in. We can't really play the audio because it's ESPN, but before we get into that schedule release, Hayden, do want to remind everyone to go to our friends at Status Jet to start planning your 2025 SMU football season now. The schedule is out. You know the away games. You know there are, once again, some hard places to get into, and this is where Status Jet can help you out by creating an experience that is unrivaled. And when you use the code PonyUpACC or mention on theponyexpress.com, you can get a discount on a round trip flight. So don't waste any time. Start planning that 2025 season. We've gotten the dry run out of our system. 2024 has come and gone. Status Jet can help get you to and from SMU games with that level of luxury that you'd expect from a private jet company. So they're proud supporters of SMU athletics and the SMU Mustangs, as well as the On the Pony Express podcast. So Hayden, we know 5 of SMU's games, and they are Missouri State week 1. We know that they're facing Baylor at home week 2. Then they head to Missouri State, and then TCU.
East Texas A&M week 1.
What did I say the first one?
Missouri State. But as cool as the golf is in Southern Missouri, I wish we could go there twice a little bit, but it is East Texas A&M week 1.
Well, hey, this is the beauty of quote unquote live recording here. But yeah, so week 1, SMU gets East Texas A&M. That was announced last week. And then they do open up ACC play week 6 against Syracuse at home, October 4th. So they do have that bye after that TCU game. So we know that the rest of that ACC schedule is going to be released basically halfway through what the ACC network has going here. And Hayden, I guess just initial thoughts going into this schedule release, just because SMU doesn't have those 3 bye weeks this year. They do have the 2. Unless the ACC has a trick up its sleeve for week 0, but I don't think so. What are your initial thoughts just overall?
I probably prefer the 2 bye weeks, to be honest. I think 3, even though, yes, you get that rhythm, man, if you're hitting your stride and let's say you've ripped off 4 wins in a row, man, you're not wanting to stop playing, take a week off, reset, and then go to the next one. You're wanting to keep that momentum. So my initial thoughts on at least the non-conference schedule that we have out right now, you open with East Texas A&M, which is a nice tune-up game for this team. We'll be able to get our new defensive line going, possibly new look at offensive line, get some of these guys a lot of touches, who might have not seen the field before. And then you host Baylor, which essentially is a private school in Texas Super Bowl, where whether you're from Waco, whether you're from Dallas, I mean, it is going to be a heated rivalry of a football game where trace it back to the Southwest Conference days, and these teams used to play every year. So that should be a Super Bowl, according to a guy I talked to at the East West Shrine Bowl who is on staff for SMU football. They're treating it like the biggest game of the year because that's essentially what it is. That will be one of those games that if SMU goes out and performs extremely well, wins in a big fashion, it'll set them up with a lot of confidence to go through the rest of the year. And then after that, you go to Missouri State. Kevin Jennings gets his little revenge game. And you really, ideally, get to rest some guys in the second half before, of course, the TCU Horned Frogs in Fort Worth, the final Iron Skillet as it stands scheduled right now. before TCU gets their new athletic director, and we'll see if the game does end up getting rescheduled. But at least as it stands right now, SMU will not play TCU in 2026. So there's at least a couple years of bragging rights on the table for that big-time football game that it always is. It will always be a very heated rivalry football game. I don't think Sonny's going to get ejected for the second straight year, but we will see what happens. And then you get a bye, and you get a Syracuse team that surprised a lot of people. Yes, they're losing Kyle McCord, who also looked really good at the Shrine Bowl this week. So they're losing a ton of production in a guy that, threw the ball 1,000 times or 700 times or whatever he did this year. And so that'll be an interesting one to see. But if SMU comes out of non-conference 4-0, I think they're going to be ranked for the opening ACC contest.
Yeah, and that's all you can hope for. And they've just revealed some of the week 0 games. Now they go to week 1 on ACC Network. You're going to have SMU on there. And these are the notable ones. I think, honestly, they're missing SMU on there, funny enough. Or they couldn't fit it all, which could be a part of it because there are, 17 teams now in the ACC. They're showing, there it is. There's SMU hosting East Texas A&M in that home opener. And Hayden, I think that's going to be a really fun environment, but also TCU at North Carolina, September 1st on that Labor Day weekend, a big test for Sonny Dykes as Bill Belichick hosts them in Chapel Hill.
Man, that is going to be crazy. The last time TCU played a head coach in his first game as a Division I head coach was, of course, Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffaloes. One of Colorado's 4 wins that season was against the defending national title appearance, TCU Horned Frogs. But I don't know. There's going to be a lot of hype riding with North Carolina. I don't know what kind of guys that Bill is going to be able to recruit. I think that's going to be one of the hardest things for him is connecting with some of these athletes. Now, guy's won 8 Super Bowls. So he can recruit off of that for sure. But most of the time with these programs, like we saw with Deion, it takes a couple years for the ball to get rolling. Hopefully in Bill's first year, I think best case scenario, North Carolina goes 7-6, make a bowl game, win it or whatever. But I don't know. Realistically, I would, as much as one side of me wants to go, man, I hope TCU loses every game. I think they probably end up pulling out a win in that one. They could be 3-0 going into our game. But we'll see, right? I mean, that's the beauty of football. I do know Bill Belichick is an NFL Hall of Fame coach. I think he's a guy that's eventually going to go back to the NFL and try to break that wins record because you can't do it in college. So I think eventually he's going to end up back in the National Football League at some level. But I do have my 2 favorite Patriots head coaches' cell phone number. Mike Vrabel did hit me up the other day. I texted him congrats, and he said, appreciate it, Howie. It's been a crazy couple weeks. So future podcast guest, maybe, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was about to say Hayden dropping the bill on us, because first name basis things, former player coach combo there. And look, before we get to week 2, want to remind you guys, Mark Villasana and Northwest Insurance Agency can help you find the right coverage for you guys. In the state of Texas, insurance rates are out of control, and that's why Mark, a SMU alum and fan, can help you out. Give him a call, 214-352-5656, or email him, markv@nwagencies.com. Whether it's home, auto, any other services he can help you out with, he's going to do his best for you. That's SMU fans and SMU alums helping each other out. And we've really appreciated his partnership with us here at On the Pony Express. And he's helped out a few of our subscribers already. So give him a shout when you can. He's down in Dallas. He's always down to talk about the SMU Mustangs. So as we get closer to week 2, and they're still chatting about it on the ACC huddle right now with our friends Taylor Tannenbaum, EJ Manuel, Eric McClain, Eddie Royal, and Coach Mark Richt, they flash it up there. SMU hosting Baylor, a big one, of course, in the state of Texas, like Hayden said. And yeah, there are recruiting battles that are going to be pitched off of this matchup. There are players that are going to maybe look at the programs very differently depending on how this game goes. So this is a huge matchup, and kudos to SMU for getting it scheduled. This is what the country needs more of. SMU Baylor, SMU, TCU, SMU, Houston, those are the type of games that really we'd like to see. And they move quickly to that week 3 now as well, flying through it. Florida State and Louisville are off in that week as SMU heads to Missouri State. And like Hayden said, Missouri State once held a commitment from one Kevin Jennings. Bobby Petrino had him offered and then ended up obviously flipping to SMU late in the process there. So I haven't seen any games that really jump out at me. Pitt and West Virginia getting together is always a great rivalry.
100%.
So that one will be a lot of fun in Morgantown if you got plans to go see that. But SMU Missouri State leads into then SMU at TCU.
Biggest game of the non-conference slate every single year. I mean, it wouldn't matter if SMU went on the road and played at Ohio State. I think people are going to care more about this crosstown rivalry than they would about playing the national champions. And as much as you can say, oh, SMU cares too much about TCU, it's unfortunately the truth. And especially you pair that with the fact that the last 5 years of this rivalry has been hotter than ever. So I just look at it as it's always going to be a big game. It's always going to be the game that sets up the rest of your season for success or failure. But we'll see what happens. There are going to be some ACC games here as they were just flashing it on the screen before that. I saw Clemson has to go to Georgia Tech in week 3. I think that's a dangerous game for Clemson if they start off the way that they did this past year, where kind of slow to start the season. You could see Georgia Tech coming out with a win there in week 3.
Yeah, now moving into week 5, Duke goes to Syracuse. So that's SMU's opponent for week 6 at home in the ACC opener for the Mustangs. So as SMU knows, a pesky Blue Devils team that the Mustangs, survived in Durham heads up to Syracuse in week 5 before SMU then hosts Syracuse. So, hey, Rhett Lashley is going to be giving Manny Diaz a call, I would imagine, between that game. As look, Syracuse has to replace Kyle McCord. This is going to be a really interesting coaching job for Fran Brown. And I actually talked to one of his top assistants, Elijah Robinson, up at the coaches convention in Charlotte. And look, they jumped out to a great start. I mean, kudos to what they were able to build quickly. And, the thing with Fran Brown is he's going to recruit. And, I think that's something that is obviously very important, having that background, because you got to sell kids on coming up there. And it's been a program that has rich history, in my opinion, at least, but they're bringing in Ricky Collins, a former LSU quarterback. And if he's going to be relied upon, that's really going to be an interesting one to see there.
I'm just glad we don't got to go to the Carrier Dome, to be honest. I am glad that one is going to open at Ford Stadium. The second year in the ACC, we get to open ACC play at home, and that is nice because SMU was obviously a very dominant team at home in 2024. I hope they can keep that streak going. I hope that they can continue to be one of the best teams in football when they're at home. But ultimately, SMU is eventually going to have to go on the road in a big game later in the year to play Clemson, and we'll see when that one is. They still haven't announced it for the show. They're on commercial right now. But, man, you talk about this SMU football team that coming off of a bye sometimes was a little slow in 2024. And we can't act like football is just going to be the exact same season it was the year prior. But trends for SMU showed that when they had a bye the week before, they did not start fast. So that is going to have to be something that is an adjustment this offseason that Coach Lashley makes a point about of, hey, what kind of adjustment do we need to make where we can come out of the bye on fire?
Yeah, this is where, you continue to maybe fine-tune things. I think overall for SMU, they're going to look at penalties and trying to clean those up, because I think the margin for error for this team might be a little bit thinner than last year with as much veteran leadership and things like that they had. So they're going to have to play a little bit cleaner, or else, things that happened late in the season, could happen to them again, or maybe you don't come out on the right end of all of that. So look, before the ACC network comes back from break, we do want to get a word in from our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. When you go up 75 to McKinney to visit any of their dealerships, mention ontheponyexpress.com for employee pricing on pre-owned and new vehicles. So check out the Thomas Auto Group. Proud SMU alum Brandon Thomas running the show up there.
Shopping for a new car, truck, or SUV? Look no further than the Thomas Auto Group. Browse our selection of over 2,000 vehicles from 3 great brands.
Watch this!
All online and in a few simple steps. Just click on the vehicle you want, save big on the most popular brands, and drive away happy. Plus, all vehicles sold are backed by the Thomas Promise. Visit our website, thomasautogroup.com, or shop in-store at the Thomas Auto Group in McKinney, home of the Thomas Promise.
Yeah, we promise we're trying to get through this just like you guys are as the ACC network does drag this out. But I will say this, they are now approaching week 6. Are they coming back and going to week 6? Which, I mean, we're 8:15 here recording this. This isn't that bad. I know the board already is saying, I love the comment from Coucham, another conference call that should have been an email. But this is, the SEC dragged theirs out for the full hour plus going through that when they did last summer's announcement of game times or whatever it was, and rolled that out. But yeah, we now get to October 4th, SMU hosting Syracuse in week 6, and we're getting ready to learn our first game that we don't know coming up here as they move into week 7. Georgia Tech and Stanford are off. If you're keeping track, SMU, of course, does play Stanford and Cal. They head to Cal. They host Stanford this time around, and it's going to be interesting to see when that game is, if SMU is going to be staying at home a lot or heading out to on that Thanksgiving weekend, if SMU draws a second straight year of being at home on Thanksgiving, whenever that does come out. But we're looking closely at week 7 and waiting for that. But of course, the ACC huddle has to talk about Clemson UNC in a matchup of 2 programs and 2 coaches with numerous championships on the field.
My matchup, though, for week 6 that I'm looking at is Miami and Florida State. I want to know, is Florida State going to bounce back to the Florida State of old? And is Miami going to be able to continue the success that they had without Cam Ward? Because we really don't know. But now we are looking at week 7 game, October 11th. Stanford travels to SMU, the first time that SMU hosts Stanford in ACC play. And I hope we can have the same success we did at Stanford, California last year, because, man, that was a fun football game in 2024.
Yeah, and that also means the Mustangs are in the state of Texas for the first 6 of the first 7 weeks, which is wild. I think that's an underrated thing that this coaching staff will have to use to their advantage and really get off to a good start this year.
At least we have a home game in October. That was a brutal stretch last season with you weren't at Ford Stadium for the entirety of October, and you get to November, and yes, that is when championships are won and lost, as I know, unfortunately, a little too well with my lack of success in November. But hey, this team was able to turn it on in November like they should. But the other notable matchups here in week 7, you got NC State at Notre Dame. I think NC State going into 2024 was one of those teams that we thought would be a lot better, and hopefully they can also bounce back.
Yeah, and we learn week 8 now, SMU at Clemson, which I can tell you, I saw this one coming. Fall weddings, the one fall wedding I have is that weekend. So I'm not going to say what I'm going to do, but I unfortunately probably have to miss. So.
Billy's gonna be sick that weekend, guys.
Yep, just not going to be able to find me. But yeah, always funny how that works out. So unbelievable draw there for the old luck. But hey, you can't escape it for that long. But what an environment that's going to be. We're going to have an interview with Phil Maffa and RJ Mickens, 2 Clemson players who were at the Shrine Bowl, and they talked up the atmosphere. We're pumped to see it.
It's going to be unreal. I'm buying my flight as soon as this gets over. I mean, that
week
is
9, SMU at Wake Forest as well. So things are really moving for the dragging it out crowd.
Yeah. But yeah, that Clemson game, since we got into the ACC, I said, whenever SMU goes to Clemson the first time, I will be there no matter what. Hell or high water, I'll be there. So looking forward to that game, no doubt.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see the atmosphere at Clemson. One of my old coworkers at the Redskins is the SID there for Dabo Sweeney in the football program now. And that's Ross Taylor. He does a great job. And then you get, the fact that SMU has to go on the road, the next 2 weeks after being at home for so long. It's going to be really interesting to see that stretch. You got to get through Clemson, but then you got to turn right back around and you go at Wake Forest, which, in terms of travel, you're going back-to-back long trips.
Yeah. To South Carolina. Next week, you're at North Carolina. We will see when this Cal game gets factored in, because that is going to throw a wrench in things with the whole coast-to-coast thing. We saw how it played out. You played Stanford. You turned around. You go to a tough Duke game that really was a blocked field goal away from being a sure thing for the Duke Blue Devils, which would have, frankly, derailed our whole season. But frankly, fortunately, SMU was able to wake up in the second half, win that game last year. But yeah, travel in the ACC, it's tough because we're in the middle of the country, but it could be worse. We could be Cal and Stanford having to go all over the place.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think out of the games that I was most excited for, not only do you have the Clemson game that looms there, just because it is such a historic place to go play games, but Rhett Lashley really respects Dabo Sweeney, and now of course it is a rematch from last year's ACC championship game, and one that SMU and of course Kevin Jennings would love to have back.
Oh yeah. Can't be a revenge game in conference. I mean, when we lost to Memphis in 2019, we got them at home in 2020, and that was one of the biggest games of the season. When we kicked the game-winning field goal, that was unreal. So definitely a big-time revenge game for this SMU team. Definitely for Kevin. Kevin, I know, is circling that one right now.
And you look at what SMU was able to do at Louisville on the road last year, and I say this, and each team's different, but there was that mentality that they were going to go out and take the first shot. And I think SMU in that game was obviously a little bit more healthy. They were in a different boat than they were maybe later in the season when you didn't have an RJ, you didn't have a Jake. Guys are banged up. Brashard Smith, maybe that was the first game he was a little banged up, I think. But they were really able to take those first shots and ride that momentum. And funny enough, last year, Louisville was able to do that and control the tempo and control everything in there. So Clemson did finally dip into the transfer portal and add one or two players. But this is a team that is mostly built on development, and Cade Klubnik versus Kevin Jennings is one of the quarterback matchups of the year.
100%. Yeah. Like we talked about going into this Clemson game this year, I think this Clemson team is beatable. I think this is not the Clemson team from 5 or 6 years ago. Yes, I know they won an ACC championship this past season, but I think SMU is still meeting them at a really great time in the season. I think they're getting them early into ACC play, which will definitely play a large factor. Hopefully you'll have guys that are a little healthier. You just had a bye week a couple weeks before that. But yeah, got to go into Clemson, got to slay the beast. It's going to be a hell of a matchup that if both teams, I think, are undefeated, I think that could be a game day game.
Yeah, that is a great point. And look, still to come in November, of course, you do have Miami looming out there. You got a trip to Boston on the calendar as well. And then you do have the Cal game, which you can expect would be on the road Thanksgiving weekend. So that one is going to be interesting to see how that one pans out. I assume it is going to be that weekend, but we'll find out here if that kind of remains the case and what most would expect. And then you do have and then Louisville. So you have Louisville and Miami coming to Ford Stadium in November, which is going to be unreal and unreal drama. This is what happens when you win games and you are now a,
blue blood
football. Yeah, blue blood. Yeah, a college football playoff team. You got to play other really good teams in November, and that's how you get remembered.
It's how you want it to be. You want to build that momentum. I mean, especially if we put together another great season and we're sniffing the college football playoff again, you want to end the year on those big wins, build a lot of momentum, and go straight into it. But we do roll over to November 1, Miami at SMU. Big game
Okay.
for Rhett Lashley. Big game for all the Miami transfers that are still trickling through. But it's going to be a big-time revenge game for those guys.
Yeah, and an opportunity for those guys that SMU was able to, end up kind of getting their spot. You looked at Miami last year and you were thinking, okay, SMU Miami, as long as SMU hangs on, this is what it's going to be for the ACC championship. And then, Miami'd, and this is an opportunity for that program to completely change how they're viewed in the grand scheme of things. If now they can beat a team that had that appearance in the ACC championship in year one. Miami has still never been to an ACC championship game.
That's an unreal stat.
It's wild,
man. You think about how good this Miami team has been. Yes, early 2000s, mid 2000s, and has had the resurgence the last few years. But yeah, never played in an ACC championship. Insane. I think it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be a nail biter. It's going to be to the end, but man, it's going to be a fun game. I hope it turns into a pit game though, but we'll see.
And you have SMU at Boston College right after that. So this is quite the tedious little stretch here for SMU, where you do have these tricky trips that have a chance to kind of come up and bite you. Going at Wake and then coming back and playing Miami, and then having to go all the way back up to Boston in November.
It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. I'm pumped. Guess what, guys? Oysters, all the things, all the seafood we could want up there in Boston, and SMU's got a chance to fix what happened last time up in the Boston area.
100%. Yeah, Boston College is going to be a very physical football team. Bill O'Brien has really made that their identity this past season. Had a couple Boston College offensive linemen and I think a D tackle in the East-West Shrine Bowl. Got to watch those guys the other day. So they'll have some replacing to do. But go to week 12. It is an open week for SMU. So SMU does catch a late bye week with just a couple of games to go in the regular season, which will be really big for some rest before ultimately a couple hard games to end the season.
Yeah, and I would expect SMU Miami to be homecoming. That's just a guess, but after going to Wake the week prior and to Clemson the week before that, I mean, that kind of lines up when homecoming usually is. So that's just a hunch there. SMU hasn't really released the full schedule, but this is so far. I mean, look, we know that it's at this point, it's SMU, and here it is, week 13, SMU hosting Louisville. This is, again, kind of how you want it, right?
Yep. Right in your wheelhouse. Yeah, you host one of the better teams in the ACC. It'll be senior day for this bunch against a really good Louisville team. This will be a great opportunity for these guys. Put an exclamation point on their career at Ford Stadium. Yes, you have a game the week after, which will more than likely –
but that's it. It's got to be Cal.
Yeah, it's got to be Cal after this. Yeah, so put an exclamation point on their home games at Ford Stadium. But Louisville's always going to be dangerous. They're always going to have guys, but this team proved that they can beat them this year.
And I think talk about way too early judgments and things like that. But, I mean, I look at what Louisville did at quarterback in the portal, and I'm not high on Miller Moss. I mean, I'm sorry. He ended up kind of getting replaced, I think. And I didn't follow USC religiously by any means, but when you bring in a guy, and again, Joe Burrow got beat out by Cardell Jones and guys like, that happened. But when you look at what he's done, and that was with Zachariah Branch, Ja'Cory Brooks, we just saw him the other day at East-West Shrine Bowl walking around. I mean, he's not out there. You do have Isaac Brown, one of the best running backs in the country. But SMU will play at Cal Thanksgiving weekend. It's just been confirmed at week 14. And so
we'll toast some wine on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, hey, Bill and I have talked about it. We've talked about doing Paso again for all of you guys. And now that it is set for Thanksgiving weekend, I guess we probably have a little bit of a decision to make, just, with everybody having family plans. But I think it's a pretty good schedule.
Oh, let's go. I won't have to take off work since it is Thanksgiving weekend. I already get those days off. Let's go.
All right. Now that the whole schedule's out, what are your reaction? We'll kind of wrap up here after that.
My initial thoughts, I think it works out in our favor. I mean, you don't have a coast to coast back-to-back bye weeks where you get at Cal and at somebody else. I like the 2 byes. I think you catch them at good points, kind of in that right before ACC play, and then you get it right in the middle of November where you can kind of rest and recover and really make a push, especially if you are going to try to play in another ACC championship game where you can have only 3 games to go at that point. Because I think that's the mindset of this team. You've set the expectation now that going and winning an ACC championship is now the realistic, attainable goal, to where now it's, okay, we got 13 games to go realistically. Like, you said it in the past, but did you really believe it up until you kind of just did it for the first time? And so, man, looking at it right now, I'd have to look at the list top to bottom, but I like our home games that we get. I mean, yes, you play the Beast in Clemson on the road, but every other game I look at as an extremely winnable game for us.
Yeah, I mean, my way too early, projection for this team, I mean, is I think 10-2 is pretty fair. Yeah. I mean, and I base so much off of, do you have your quarterback back and is he good?
Yeah.
And you look at the schedule and half of them don't have their quarterback back, maybe more. I mean, the only guys that have their quarterback back, Baylor, that I know for sure, TCU, Clemson. I don't even know about Wake's situation.
I don't know. They've had a tough situation though recently. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, well, yes, Kevin had an incredible season this past year. We were also able to lean on the defense a little bit. Defense wins championships. We lost a lot up front, and that's unfortunately going to be the story for the first few weeks of this year, where even if the defense is playing lights out and then they give a big run, people are immediately going to jump to last year's defense wouldn't have done that. We didn't replace enough. But it's going to take time for the group to develop and play together and all that. And I know on defense, one guy can make the other 10 right. But with Scott Simons, he's going to draw up some stuff. Guys are going to have to learn how to gel and play together, and they will. But you lose guys like Elijah. You lose guys like Jared Harrison Hunt. And you're just looking at this team, and yes, they signed guys in the transfer portal that I think we can all take a deep breath and go, okay, we reloaded. We'll be okay. But it's just hard to look at those 2 guys that we lost in addition to the countless others on the D-line and still feel good. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to just take a second for me to be like, oh yeah, defense is still fine.
Well, and Rhett Lashlee will be the first to tell you that, SMU was generally able to stay healthy on defense.
Yeah.
And that was critical. And that's where this is going to be really, really interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I think it's a really good schedule for the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you could draw it up much better knowing you're not going to have 2 byes in the first, 2/3 of the season. You're going to get to stay in the state of Texas 6 of the first 7 weeks.
Yep.
And then you got to go every other week, basically, on the road, at home, on the road, at home. So in a way, you go Clemson, Wake, then Miami, then BC, then Louisville, Cal.
You only have one back-to-back road trip, which is
yeah. And in theory, SMU should be able to take care of Wake. You just can't let whatever happens the week before, beat you. And I think one thing that last year's schedule kind of had nicely was they had their big games so early. TCU, Florida State, Louisville, wow, huge games. And then Pitt ended up being a big game, but
yeah,
once they got to November, it was kind of like, this is winning time. This is over. And This time around, you have a really interesting run of November.
Yeah, me and the coaching staff were hyping up, this is the biggest game. No, this year with Miami, Louisville, it will be for sure.
Yeah. And we'll be here to cover it all the whole way for you guys. We've got a long offseason ahead. We're going to start looking at positions. We do have a lot of player interviews from the Shrine Bowl to dish out. So we've got some fun coming with SMU players and some guys with ties to the state of Texas as well. So be sure to check them out. But look, Hayden, if you don't have anything else, we're not going to keep people here all, locked up and everything, listening to us babble on about teams in January.
Yeah. We still got 7 months we play. Yeah. 7 months. We play at the end of August.
Yeah.
We got 7 months before the ball gets kicked off. I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. So look, it's been a blast doing this. Let us know what you think in the comments of this setup that we had for this podcast, but we thoroughly enjoyed doing it. So we'll have to do it again next year, whenever the schedule comes out. So hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Please reach out to all of our sponsors and supporters and work with them on whatever you may need, whether it's Status Jet, whether it's Thomas Auto Group, Northwest Insurance Agency. Support them and hit the follow button, subscribe, like all the things to the On the Pony Express podcast. So for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.